Do you crave better self-esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self-confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award-winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self-doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self-worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. Last episode, we began a 3-part series on living a life driven by purpose and passion. In previous episodes, we explored our departure from old ways of thinking and acting. We assessed the things holding us back from thriving in our purpose with passion and confidence. In the next 2 episodes, we'll dissect the importance of setting up a plan to fulfill our purpose and how to stay on track to succeed. Today, we're going to get to work breaking down the work and steps we need to take to strategically plan out this next leg of our journey. If you're tired of walking in a fog and wondering why you haven't been able to live with better clarity and purpose, this episode is for you. I know all too well how frustrating and futile it is to be stuck at a crossroads and not know what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to do it. Recently, I've actually been working through an experience that has me wondering why my purpose seems so stagnant at the moment. So I began working through the very process I'm about to share with you today, a process that's been a guide to me my entire adult life. I cannot wait to show you how to find your way to better clarity and purpose. In this episode, you'll gain some insights into how to identify your purpose and goals. You'll hear about my struggles and successes in living with purpose and passion, and you'll learn some strategies I use to develop an action plan and to stay on track. Last episode, we talked about figuring out who we are and what we want. That's a really important step that we need to take because not knowing who we are or what we want is the number one distraction keeping us from living with purpose and passion. I mentioned that it's not the best idea to just keep going through the motions and expecting inspiration to hit us over the head, but it's also not wise to think that we can just keep going through those motions and expecting that inspiration will be our guide. Like, that's just not how it works. It's hard enough to figure out our way when we're in the middle of a situation, when we have a plan, when we know what we'd like to do, or we know how we would like to see things play out. It just doesn't make any sense. It's counterintuitive to keep putting ourselves into situations where we don't know what we're doing and we're constantly in the circle of chaos trying to figure it all out while we're still also trying to figure out what our plan is and our next steps and our next actions should be. In last episode, I also broke down how once we pinpoint that who and the what, it's time to understand what we're after in this moment or this season. It doesn't stop here, though. So the next distraction that we have to avoid is not having that action plan. It is critical to have and develop an action plan. That's what's going to guide us through. Without an action plan, how will we actually know what we want and how we plan to achieve it? So number 1, to begin, do we have an aim, a goal, or an end objective? Not just in the sense that we know what these things might be, that we have them in our mind, but that we have identified and planned out how we expect to accomplish it. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. Have you sat down and asked yourself a few really key questions? So we have to figure out, number 1, what things have we identified that will help us succeed? Then we also have to think about, are there things that are already in place? And then also, what will need to come into play in the very near future or later down the road? And of course, before we can do any of these things, we have to flesh out those things that we talked about last episode, the who and the what. You can't start to form a plan if you don't know what the plan is for. It doesn't make any sense. Then step number 2 is, what is that action plan?
Have we set some things in place to help ourselves attain our desired outcomes, goals, or purpose? Beyond this, what is our plan to stay on track and focused? So we have to keep these two things in mind. And then the third stage is, have we written it down? Have we committed it to a space outside of our head? I know I keep coming back to this concept over and over and over throughout the different episodes, but really, you're going to have to write some things down if you don't like to write things down. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things that you're going to have to write down. But right now, we're just talking about getting some thoughts, getting some plans, getting some ideas out in a visual space that we can then see them outside of our head. So one of the things that I use a lot in different capacities is multimodal media. So these multimodal texts with visual media on them. So it's okay if you just write some things down. And that's what you want to do. You just want to write some things down. You don't want to use any other visual aids. That's fine. The text on the page itself can serve as your visual. But maybe you're like I am, and you like to see these different visual things come into play and all kind of enhance each other in the same space. So I do a lot of multimodal planning. I like to put these things somewhere where I can see them regularly. And even on occasion, if I have like a deadline or a plan that I think should happen in a specific time, or like one of my coaches said to me, send yourself something that is during a time when you think like your energy is going to start to fail, or the hopelessness is going to start to set in, or the dread's going to start to kill your energy, is you can send yourself an email and you can set it to deliver on a particular date. So you write it on day 1, thinking about how on day 60, you want to receive it. And it doesn't matter what you put in that email. It could just be the plan itself. It could be some of the steps you're going to take. It could be words of encouragement, affirmation. It doesn't matter. You have to decide what to put in that email based on what you're trying to accomplish with it. But there's also these vision boards that I mentioned last week. So if you didn't tune into last episode, I talked about how my husband inspired me to begin doing these vision board things, which can be a surface in your home. It could be the front of your fridge, or in the case of our younger years, it was a closet that was in our office that was a converted bedroom into an office. Or it could be on paper. You could have a poster. You can have a digital space where you create this thing, almost like a Pinterest, where you keep creating all of these different things that are all in one space, that are all focused on the same thing. So you're figuring out what a purpose is, what a goal is, and you are putting images. Maybe you've cut out, maybe they're images of yourself. So maybe you're like trying to inspire yourself to get back to a specific thing, or maybe it's like get back to school or get a specific job. And so maybe it's just like the logo of something, or maybe it's like in the case that I was talking about last week, like my husband wanted a boat. And so he had a picture of a cabin cruiser boat on the front of the closet. And then that vision progressed. So as we started getting smaller boats, he would put bigger boats on there to keep himself encouraged to not stop with fulfilling that purpose or fulfilling that goal. He wanted to keep aspiring to reach new goals and to get better things. There's another thing that I do. I call it collage calendar journaling. I mentioned it also last episode, and I'm probably going to do some visuals in the video version of this. So if you want to see some of the visuals that I'm going to be describing in this episode, you can find the link to the YouTube video version of this in the show notes below. I teach this at local libraries, and I also teach it to some of my coaching students and clients, where I bring a lot of different elements all into one book in space. So you can think of it as a journal. You can pick whatever size works for you, and you're putting calendars, you're putting notes, you're putting goals, you're putting these vision boards. I do different like magazine cutouts and newspaper cutouts, and even pictures that I print out or pictures that I already have in my possession, and I collage these all together. I even do like found lists and found poetry with headlines and text from these different media sources, and I create this like visual background. around with this new idea and concept on it. And I put all of my calendar pages in as I'm going, so I don't put them in and start right away with like the whole year, for instance, in the book already glued in place. I put them in the back of the journal and I add them depending on where I'm at in the journal at the time of that new month beginning. And then I build the page around it and then the pages that follow. And I have all different types of sections in there. Like obviously I'm a writer and I'm a teacher and I'm a speaker. And I go to different events that also nurture my areas of expertise. And so I have all these different sections and all these different things that go into the whole journal. And it's really this cool visual thing that not only keeps everything under one space, it is really enlightening. It's exciting actually to look at it. So even looking at it, if you're a visual creative person, being able to see the way that I've organized things, my to-do lists and different things that carry over from month to month and don't get carried over from month to month is this very inspiring thing that helps keep me focused on my purpose and also nurtures my passion and nurtures my creativity while it keeps me on track. So it's this really cool thing that maybe you will also find to be a very useful resource, and you will learn ways to make it your own so that it's also this great visual organized space for you too. Recently, I've been going through my own stagnant season. So where I feel my purpose is stagnating in a few areas. So when I talk about purpose also, I don't want you to get focused on that you just have one purpose. We have different purposes for different areas in our life. So if you think about how you have different areas in your life, you have your physical health, for instance, you have your mental health, for instance, you might have your social life, your home life, you might have your extracurricular things that you do, and there might be a lot of purposes in those different things. And then we start to get into our careers and we start to get into maybe our growth and our educational, roles and purposes. And so within each one of those things, there might be a different purpose and different passions. But what I'm talking to you about here is figuring out like a purpose in this season of your life. And maybe there are multiple things that are built into that purpose, but what are you called to do? What have you decided that you're going to work on and do in this period of your life? And so that's what I'm talking about here. And maybe there are a bunch of moving parts. Don't try to take on all of these at once. You will go out of your mind. And if you're already going out of your mind in the chaos of not understanding the structure of your purpose, you really don't want to start taking everything out all at once. So just take smaller things, maybe a couple of interrelated things if you can't just do it one at a time and one at a time. I know sometimes life moves very fast and we have to get a grasp on things, and we really have to know what we're doing, because sometimes we might miss out on opportunities if we don't have at least a plan in place and start acting on that plan in order to fulfill that purpose in that particular time and instance. So you may have heard me talk about a few episodes ago, I had this near-death season in the spring right before summer started where I spent a lot of time on the couch. I was kind of bedridden, so I would just be like with my laptop on my stomach while I was lying down, was like trying to work through a couple of things. One of them was developing this actual podcast series and working with some of my coaches, but I was really, really sick and experiencing some medical negligence and misguidance, and that was perpetuating my health decline. And I was at this very hopeless time where I was really suffering, and I had a lot of time on my hands to reflect on what the heck are you doing? Like, what are you supposed to be doing in this purpose? Sometimes that'll happen. God or the universe will really just slow you down and say, no, girl, you need to sit down and figure out what your purpose is right now. And you need a plan, because you've got a lot of things going on, and some of these things don't belong in your life anymore. They don't serve your purpose anymore, and you need to figure those things out. So without anything else to do other than try to plug away at some of the few things that I could do, I self-reflected. And I spent a lot of time really mentally going through and then charting out and writing down some of the things that I needed to refocus on. and some of the things I didn't even realize what my purpose was and where my passion was driving that purpose into different directions. And, of course, you go through the pleading with God, like, I will promise I will do this or I will do that if I get off this couch, if I make it out of this alive. I know I'm making a joke about it, but I think all of us can relate to those moments where we really feel like so down and so defeated and we're just not sure if we're going to make it. And so we start doing the plea deal. If I get out, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. So I found myself at that moment where I was saying that. But then as I went deeper into my meditations, I started to really uncover some things that were giving me clarity about my passion and areas of purpose. So I have been working, for instance, on co-authoring this memoir, the book that just came out, USA versus Raj. And we were preparing to go into production to publish it. And we also started working with the movie producer and his whole crew to help their writers start to develop the film adaptation of the book. So I'm entering into all these interesting interactions with this film crew and really seeing areas where my passion is thriving. It wasn't just in writing the book and developmentally editing the book and, all the really cool things that I got to do on that project. But here I am in this new stage and I'm realizing that I really thrive in this community. And I really thrive on these teams of individuals on longer term projects. And so as I started working and developing these working relationships with the different individuals on this part of the project, my purpose in some of my freelance work started to become more clear. And some other things that I shouldn't be doing and focusing on also came into view. And I was getting such clarity. And one of the things that I had made a decision the year prior was to step away from higher ed teaching. I made that decision and I started doing some other things. And I stepped away from adjunct teaching because that was a very futile cycle where the pay is super low in the amount of work that you have to take on in order to even just make enough money to eat is just incredible. There's no turnkey. You don't just do your lessons, do your class, come home. The amount of grading and student assessment is endless. It is endless. And that doesn't even take into consideration all of the cheater policing that you have to do with making sure students are doing all of their own work, that they're not plagiarizing, and that they're not using AI. So even though I had taken that step back from adjunct teaching, I had still spent the last year up until this point actively, very aggressively applying for full-time positions, thinking, well, if I just move out of first year writing kinds of roles, that maybe just working with the creative writing, maybe that will be the thing. And there was a part of me that was thinking this whole time, you're still going to be stuck with a lot of the same things that you don't want to do. So maybe something that I should clarify here right now is that when you're trying to figure out what it is you do want, you can learn a lot about that by listing out what you don't want. So what you no longer want to do, what you maybe can't do, what you won't tolerate anymore, you make that list and that also becomes part of the guide. Some of that might even come into the plan, but we could learn more from 50 things on the what I don't want list that gives us maybe 6 things that I do want. And you can look at that and say, I think this want list is way too short, but really getting at those 50 things that we don't want really helped us get to these meaningful 6 things that we do want. And then we can really narrow in and hyper focus on setting up that action plan to serve those purposes. So I had gone through that process, and here I found myself not just actively pursuing it, but there were several instances where I made it to the second and third round of interviewing. So I was considering taking these jobs, even moving to another state in order to have these jobs, where I had already had that list of all those reasons why that is not the type of teaching that I want to do. And I even was to a point now when I got sick where I was pursuing a different type of teaching, which was in the form of doing these podcasts and also getting back into coaching and mentoring and doing a few other things that I will be sharing in the very near future for how I can teach in a different capacity, and that will connect me to different individuals to work with in a much more meaningful way or in a similarly meaningful way. So as I had this time sitting there reflecting, realizing that I really desire those long-term working relationships. And I also recognize that I love to teach, but not in a traditional classroom. I love to grow and learn. So I'm also open to that. And all of this time that I'm sitting there, I am trying to identify some of those things that I need to do to reestablish a new action plan. So sometimes we already have an action plan and now we have to come and we have to establish a new action plan. And this one has to align with our current purpose and goals. So the things that we are doing that don't align with that are not taking us in the right direction. And I quickly learned this. So in my plans, one of the things that I identified was that I needed to refreshen up on the ways that I speak, in the ways that I teach, and to be less scripted, for instance, and just talk, kind of like I do when I'm teaching a classroom. So as I meditated on this new action plan and some of the things that I wanted to accomplish with my speaking and my teaching, I had this list of things, and there were several of them, and I was like, okay, thinking, where the heck can I do is a lot of these things all in one place? And so I really meditated on it. I prayed on it. And like 2 days later, the dean from one of the colleges that I've taught at for the last decade reaches out to me and says, can you take these 2 classes? And my first reaction was, no, this is going in the wrong direction. This is backward. And then I just sat on it. I just sat on it and I just thought about, where else are you going to get this temporary opportunity? Because what I forgot to mention was I also was like, I'm going to need to take on a temporary part-time job right now in order to make ends meet. So now I have that I'm thinking about. And then I have this list of things where I'm like, where can I start practicing these particular things, getting better at them, getting a refresher, freshening up some of my skill set. And then boom, I get this opportunity and I sit on it and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to say. I would be an idiot to take it. I would be an idiot not to take it. So after reflecting on it, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take the class and I'm going to, like I always do, structure the curriculum in a way that I'm also going to be a fellow traveler in the learning process. Not all the way through. Obviously, you have to bring your expertise into the classroom, but I always build in new areas for my knowledge to grow in the different mini units. So one of the things that, which I just mentioned a few minutes ago, was this multimodal media. I definitely brought in a lot of that new stuff for me, not just new concepts or new apps and, new ways of doing things, but also renewed ways. So a lot of times there's old things that exist that I already know how to use very well, but the ways that new audiences use them has changed. And so I set myself up to even learn and renew my skills in those areas. So that's just one of the things that I like to do as a teacher, which also opens me up to model the very behaviors that I hope students will exemplify also. Because we can't keep telling our students, oh, well, you have to take these high risks when the stakes are low, and then they can't quite see how that functions, or they don't know, like, how have you really successfully done these things. So now when you place yourself into their group as a peer and you work through it in real time with them, and they see the trial and error happening, and they see you adjusting, and they see you saying, I'm not really sure about that question. Let's look that up right now, or I'll look it up and get back to you. And so they see all that happen, which is another beautiful part about learning. As I was putting together this plan, I also had to find things that were really opening up my passion so that it would guide my choices and my plans. And I was committing these to the page, but in the same time, I was also bringing other things out that were opening my heart and my mind to new possibilities. And some of the things that I learned right when I stepped into the teaching role was why I didn't want to do this on a full-time permanent basis. I needed to see some of those things again to reinforce, like, you're not going to go running back in this other direction because this is not your purpose. This is not your calling. And you also can sense what isn't your purpose and isn't your calling when you feel no peace and you feel such unrest when you are operating in that. So there should be a sense of peace and a sense of fulfillment and just where you're just at rest in your purpose. Not to say, like, if you have something that's high energy that you're going to feel super calm. That's not what I'm talking about here. But you have to listen to yourself and listen to the situation and learn what is it trying to tell you when you don't feel any peace in it. And then you might be like, well, I don't understand because I know that I'm called to do this particular thing. Maybe it's just not the way. So like I was learning in the classroom, and I'm still learning in the classroom, that this way of teaching is not my way. And it's okay that I'm back here and I'm going to finish strong because I committed to those students and I committed to the school. And so I'm going to finish strong and I'm going to bring my excellence and I'm going to bring a good attitude because it's not my students' fault that I'm realizing again, oh, this isn't my purpose. But also all these things that were on my list of things that I wanted to sharpen or pull out a little bit more, they're all there. So it was that one opportunity that's literally under one roof, and it's only 16 weeks. So there wasn't anything else that I could think of that would let me practice my current skill set and acquire a bunch of new skills than the classrooms that I'm in right now. So I don't have regrets. It's just frustrating sometimes to deal with the things that I dread doing as far as the grading and the catching, the cheating and the holding the students accountable when I do find them cheating, and all the time and the energy that steals from me, because that does rob you of time that you just can't get back. And then I didn't deserve to lose. But again, I took the reminder, I took these things under advisement, and I'm utilizing all of the benefits that I'm receiving from this, knowing that this season is about to close, and I continue to be very strategic about that action plan, because this is just one small thing in the action plan. So I've opened myself up to these other things that are on the action plan, and I've been taking steps. And if you've got a few things on that list, you can only take a step here and a step here and a step here, one at a time. And if it's different areas, obviously you can't be in two areas at once. So you have to give yourself that grace to just go at a particular pace and to just know that when you wake up, you have another opportunity and another day to take more steps and to keep pacing yourself along the long journey. Have that long game kind of mentality with your action plan. Everything cannot be executed overnight or concurrently at the same time. So you have to, build that kind of grace and thinking into this entire planning process and execution process. So recently I was coaching a student to take the action steps that I outlined in this episode, and I was meeting with her, and right away she came to the table with her own journal notes. She had printed out some journal notes, some things that she wanted to say, that she had identified some things, and she didn't want to forget those things. She didn't want to get them out of order. And she was sharing these things, and I thought, wow, this is awesome. She's already talking about the what and the why, even though I haven't gone over all this stuff with her yet. So after she shares all this stuff with me, I start taking her through the basic steps. And what is the action plan? What is already in place for you? So we had to break some of that down. What is already going on? What are you already committed to? So it's not just like what's in place. Your action plan isn't just all of the things that you set out to do. Sometimes you're committed to things that are a little bit outside of your control. And so you have to think about that. Those are also things that are in place. Maybe there are environmental, situational things that are in place. What practical things do you need to succeed? So you have to start identifying those things and then figuring out how you're going to bring them into the situation and into your life. Which things will you tackle first and why? So there has to be a hierarchy of what you're going to tackle. Otherwise, just going through the motions, if you have a list of 15 things and you've just got them 1 through 15 in the order that they came out of your head, that might not be the most effective strategy for you to be optimally successful. There might be things that are lower down on the list that are super important and maybe more time sensitive. And if you don't do them in the right time, your purpose is never going to come to fruition anyway. And this is something that I was talking about with that student, is to create that hierarchy of things. Like, what has to take priority here? What things need to come into play in the near future? So that was something that we had to talk about then, because we had to come up with a plan. These things have to be done. Then the next thing that we talked about was what things need to come into play in the near future and how should these things play out. And then the final thing that we talked about, and we spent the most time talking about, was these visuals that she was going to use to organize different areas in her life, to get that action plan out into this visual space that she was then going to use to keep her on track and to keep her motivated and to keep her excited about the bigger picture and the bigger plan. So something that she was already doing was she was keeping track of her time in like 3 or 4 different places. Then she told me that she was journaling in like 2 or 3 different places. You know, she had her notes feature on her phone, and then she also had 2 different journals that she wrote in. And I started telling her about this collage calendar journaling thing that I do, and how she could take and kind of incorporate a lot of these things into one space and then still use some of these larger items outside of this space so that she's coming across them in her living space, not just when she's sitting down with her journal. So for instance, you know, using that calendar that takes up the whole front of your fridge, that could be the very big visual. And she could even bring in some other visual things, not just the text itself, writing appointments, but she could bring in those collage elements there, or the vision board things where you keep that also in the same space, or maybe you're using magnets to put some of those visual elements into the same space and creating that kind of collage vision board with your calendar. And then using the digital calendar to set reminders so that you get the notification on your phone for just those really important things, like obviously like appointments that you can't miss, maybe big assignment deadlines that you can't miss, when do you work next, things like that, where you're setting those reminders for yourself in the digital space. So even though it's a lot of these different moving parts, once you get into the rhythm of it, it really doesn't feel like you're putting in a bunch of extra time to do these things. And if you think about every time that you stay on track and it costs you nothing to do that, then it becomes easier for you to want to do these things because they work. So if they don't work, then you also have to readjust and think about, like, that's not working. So if, like, the digital calendar doesn't work for me, it works for so many people. But what happens is I tend to overlook the notifications because I get a lot of notifications on my phone. And so I found real quickly that that's not a particular thing that works really well for me. Although there are times where there's a big event or something where I do put it in there and I give myself a few reminders so that I have a less chance of missing those notifications, but I don't rely on that to organize my entire life. Like, that just didn't work for me, but it, again, works for lots of people. So as I wrap things up with this student, we also, promised to come back together and review the action plan and to go through what she had done previously with the what she wants, that purpose stuff, and why she wants it. And then take the action plan and kind of like put both of these side by side and make sure like she's taking the right steps and she has the right things planned out. There was a very interesting thing that happened as we were wrapping up, though. As we started talking about this visual part, which again, we spent the most time on, her eyes started to light up. She came to me with that hashtag mood. Everything about her disposition was hopeless. Even though she had all this stuff typed out. She felt this dread and hopelessness, like, I don't know how to do all this stuff that I just wrote out. I just know that I feel it in my bones. I feel it in my soul. I know this is my purpose. I know this is about myself now, and I want to do these things, but I have no idea how to do it. So when people come to me in that spirit, and you just see like their whole body is hopeless, their expression, their body language, even the words that they're saying, that lack of courage and that lack of confidence. So it was encouraging to me to see that hope return to her, and it just infused her. It was like it filled her up. Like she was deflated, and this hope started to fill her up, and it projected back from her eyes that she knew she had a plan and she was capable of achieving these things and fulfilling her purpose in this moment and in the near future to be successful. And some of the strategies she admitted that she was already using, and some of them I was giving her a new take on them. And then she also obviously learned a few brand new strategies, and she was really excited to be able to go back and practice these things, knowing that she was also going to come back and be able to report to me. And as we were talking about all these things, the thing that really struck me in that moment, not just seeing the hope return to her, was that it was an energized hope. The type of hope that helps the actions feel less like work and more like a power move. And so that was really exciting to be the coach watching that happen. And I can't wait to see where that energized hope takes her now as I'm working with her and into her future. And I'm also excited to see how this student implements these strategies and how they will help her succeed and how they will help her rebuild a better future for herself. So until we meet again, I encourage you to explore this action plan strategy. What will you discover about your purpose and passion over the next week? What things will you plan out and begin doing to live and thrive in your purpose? What will your action plan visuals look like? Maybe you'll be so proud of some of the multimodal visuals that you come up with that you'll want to share them with me. I would love to see those. So if you have them and you share them in another social media or mass media space, you could drop me a link in the comments of the episode, and I will definitely go track those down. Or if you want to send them to me via email, you can find a contact form on the Restore Your Inner Warrior website page. Again, a link for that is down below in the show notes. Not only would I love to see the plans that you come up with and how creative you get with it, I would also like to be able to have something that helps me as a coach show other clients and students other ways that they could utilize these same strategies and customize them and make them unique for their own lives and their own preferences and their own situation. So really, if you feel like sharing those with me, I would love to see those. And until we meet again, keep envisioning your purpose and passion-driven plans and finding uniquely you ways to express them. Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. If you haven't already, consider joining my Facebook group of women just like you, the Restore Your Inner Warrior Sisterhood. Here's a safe space to get tips, share stories, and find community support. And if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. As you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Saturday. Ciao.